Just outside the Sudanese capital, Khartoum, these men have joined the People's Defense Militia, ready to fight alongside government troops against rebels in the south and east of Sudan. But the United States government says this is just a cover, that in secret such camps are used to train foreign terrorists such as Hezbollah and Hamas. The spiritual leader of Sudan's Islamic government says that any foreigners here are just refugees.
I don't think it's fair to say that Sudan is harboring opposition and rebels and revolutionaries from all over the world. I mean, these people don't count as much as there were a few hundred people who came from their countries because they can't live there, who came to the Sudan because the Sudan is a multiplicity of the diversity of ethnicities.
But diversity of religion is contentious. Since 1989, when the current government seized power, Islamic law, the Sharia, has been increasingly rigorously applied. Here in the north, even in the more enlightened Women's University of Khartoum, wearing the veil has become more common. These boys study 16 hours a day. They cannot leave school until they've learned the Quran by heart. Those that try to escape may be shackled or whipped. The government says that American accusations of terrorism and human rights abuse are just prejudice against the Islamic system. The West fears what it doesn't understand. Critics of the government say Christians are persecuted. They're allowed to practice their religion, but suffer discrimination in employment, housing, and schooling. Most of the Christians come from the south of the country, but civil war there has driven many north to the capital, Khartoum. Mayo, on the outskirts of Khartoum. 2 million southern Sudanese live in these camps. Having fled civil war and hunger in the south, they are dependent on aid agencies for healthcare and food. Most of these people are Christians or animists. Mothers bring their babies for vaccination, but southerners say Muslim charities in the camps pressurize them to convert to Islam in exchange for aid. People here are afraid to criticize the government. Under foreign pressure, the government allowed a UN human rights official into the country, the first for 2 years. But despite this apparent cooperation, UN aid flights to the more needy in the south have been frequently blocked.
Let's face it, food is strength. Food provides people with the ability to continue to cope with the rigors of their existence in the war-torn South. So I think the underlying rationale behind stopping the flights of these planes is to weaken the population.
Now the UN Security Council has imposed sanctions on Khartoum. Such disputes over aid between UN and government officials have added significance.
I'd say the resolution 1054, which is basically aimed at terrorism, has sort of heightened an air of anxiety around dealings between the government and the UN.
It's an anxiety which people in Khartoum are beginning to feel. They may see no evidence of the Western allegations of terrorism, but they are increasingly aware of foreign pressure. Economic sanctions mean that the cost of the civil war is felt more acutely in the capital, where there's been unrest over price increases. Opposition politicians, operating covertly, are finally getting an international response to their criticisms of the Khartoum regime. The Sudanese government is beleaguered in other ways. There are rebel movements fighting inside the country, particularly in the south. With American diplomatic and financial backing, some neighboring states, such as Eritrea and Ethiopia, do support the guerrillas fighting the Khartoum government. Traveling south, government officials set off for a tour of southern towns. A former rebel leader, Riek Machar, has joined them. Riek Machar defected to the government's side in April '96. With him is Mohammed Khalifa, the Khartoum Minister for Peace, who insists that the decades-long civil war in the south has been finally settled.
there is no war between we and the factions that we signed with them. And the people now, I think the will of the people now, they don't like more waging of war. So really, by de facto, there is a ceasefire now.
By bringing former rebel leader Riek Machar south, the government hoped to convince Southerners that the war is really over. But large areas of the region are in fact still controlled by Machar's former colleagues in the SPLA, the Sudan People's Liberation Army. The guerrillas operate mainly in the bush, while most of the towns are held by government troops. In Juba, the capital of southern Sudan, the government shows off its military prowess. And in the southern city of Wau, Riek Machar went on to tell Southerners that the government can accommodate their aspirations for more autonomy. The roadshow draws a crowd, eager to know why Riek Machar, a rebel leader for so long, has been convinced by government talk of a federation for the South.
They're offering the exercise of right of self-determination through a referendum. This is, as you know, right of self-determination is a basic right. It is also a democratic process for resolving conflicts.
Sudan is a beautiful country of many tribes and dialects. The medieval sits alongside the modern. From the harsh desert of the north to the lush equatorial south, Sudan's history has always been turbulent. If Sudan's brand of Islam were confined to its famous whirling dervishes, neither America nor the UN Security Council would be concerned. Sudan has been virtually ignored through decades of civil war in which tens of thousands have died. But if fears of international terrorism bring intensified sanctions and more support for the rebels, then both the Sudanese economy and its people will suffer even more.